Hi, welcome to LdEduTalk. I am Beth Powell with the Reading Clinic.
And hello, I'm Dr. Lynn Baldwin, a learning coach.
And I'm Lynne Stiezel, an educational therapist in Palo Alto.
And while Lynn is getting ready, let me give you a little background about our speaker today. Lynn is going to be speaking about how to help your child with reading and learning to read in the home. So Lynne Stiezel is a board-certified educational therapist. She's been in private practice for a very long time in Palo Alto, California. She places particular emphasis in her practice on reading and writing skills, as well as executive functioning skills, organizational skills, and the use of assistive technology, something you're going to hear a fair amount about today. She's been in the field of education for 45 years and has 2 masters in education and in counseling. She's authored numerous curricula, as well as a psychology textbook entitled Empowerment Through Spontaneity. Ms. Stiezel was on the board of the Northern California branch of the International Dyslexia Association for 15 years, and she also served on the board of Learning Ally. And for the past 20 years, Lynn has co-facilitated a support group for parents of children with learning disabilities at Parents Helping Parents, php.com, which is a nonprofit in Silicon Valley down in San Jose. And then finally, she's also co-facilitator for the Silicon Valley Association of Educational Therapists. So, Lynn, take it away.
Thanks, Lynn and Beth. I am looking forward to it. There are so many things that parents can do, so I'm going to talk pretty fast. Parents are more concerned about their child's progress in reading than in any other subject taught in school, and rightfully so. In order for students to achieve in math, science, English, history, etc., reading skills must be developed to the point that most of them are automatic. However, many students are still struggling with word recognition when their classmates have moved ahead. Parents and primary school staff are key in detecting and supporting a struggling reader, not only in helping them learn to read or find professionals to help, but also enthusiastically making reading fun, even if it means using alternative ways to the printed text. As teachers and parents, it is all too easy to become outwardly exasperated with children's behavior when it comes time to read, especially if the child cannot read at their appropriate age level. But this is not to mean that they can't comprehend the information. Therefore, it is important that parents start early if they can. Research shows that children learn about reading before they enter school. In fact, they learn in the best manner through observation. Young children, for example, see people around them reading newspapers, books, maps, and going to bookstores and libraries. Also, parents can do a lot to foster an understanding of print by pointing out the signs in their environment and by letting their children know that they themselves really enjoy reading. When reading to a child, you can run your index finger on the line of print. This procedure is simple and helps children begin to notice words as they are being read, and that words have meaning. Sentences are made up of words, and some sentences extend beyond a single line of print. When young, children also gain an awareness of the conventions of reading. That's reading left to right and top to bottom. A few weeks ago, Nancy Redding talked about detecting language problems, but I want to remind you that parents are key in being aware of potential problems in their reading. I'm not going to go over this list specifically because Nancy did that already. However, I want you to know that the National Institute of Child Health and Human Development supported research on early child development, which found that as early as 2.5 years of age, children who later developed reading difficulties were deficient in the length of their sentences, pronunciation accuracy, and syntactic complexity. Similarly, as they got older, 3-year-olds began to show deficits in receptive vocabulary and object naming abilities, and 5-year-olds exhibited weaknesses in object naming, phonemic awareness, and letter sound knowledge, which is really important for kindergarten. So as early as kindergarten, you can begin to detect whether your child is going to have trouble in reading. So being aware of their reading problems is crucial. Priscilla Vale, a foremost authority in reading, stated, if a child has trouble in the early levels of school, get help immediately. Do not wait to see if the child will grow out of it. Prevention is always easier than doing remediation later, and learning differences don't disappear spontaneously. If you worry that receiving extra help will make your child feel different, please realize that your child already feels different by virtue of what he or she can or can't do. The National Reading Panel discovered that children, in fact, felt less stigmatized with good remediation, and they projected that the number of children suffering from reading failure would be reduced from the current national average of 38% to less than 6%. Dr. Reed Lyon, the former chief of Child Development and Behavior of the National Institute of Child Health and Human Development, found that children with reading problems overcome their difficulties with a good research-based, systematic, explicit, and intensive instruction in phonemic awareness, phonics, reading fluency, vocabulary, and reading comprehension strategies, which Nancy Cushon-White talked about in one of the earlier. All too often, as parents, we are told that our children will catch up as they mature. So don't you worry, he or she can read at grade level. That's not true. In early elementary school, from 1st through 3rd grade, children theoretically are learning how to read. It is a complex process, difficult for some and easy for others. So care must be taken during a child's early years not to only emphasize learning to read, but also must encourage students to read to learn, even if it means they use alternative print materials. If a student's progress seems at odds with his or her general level of ability, you can use alternative methods of gaining information. Gaining information should be pleasurable. All children should be provided with materials in the home that arouse curiosity and extend their child's natural interest in the world around them. By encouraging and modeling leisure time reading and brain stimulation in the home, parents take the most important step in fostering their child's reading development. Making reading fun is terribly important. Enjoy books together with your child. It is as important to read together at their intellectual level as it is at their grade level. Read out loud what they see while doing chores, shopping, labels and signs and menus at the restaurant. Whatever chance you have to reinforce the importance of words, take it. Providing motivational material on subjects of interest, even if it means using magazines or comic books or recipes, do that. Reading to learn is equally as important as learning to read. For children who have difficulty learning to read, have them keep up intellectually by listening to books with them. When they are very young, of course, reading to them is great, But as they mature, you want to have them gain independence. So audiobook reading is better. Discuss content with the child to be sure they understand. Most learning disabled students do better if they can look at the print at the same time they are listening, even if it is above their reading level. It also helps to increase not only vocabulary, but also fluency. Parents and teachers need to be aware of their child's specific needs, whether it be phonemic awareness, fluency, processing, tracking, comprehension, critical thinking, or retention. It is important to understand their challenge so that we do not blindly throw ineffective solutions at a child, which can make them feel broken. The help needs to be specifically tailored for each child. Parents need to provide a well-structured environment in the home for learning. Every day, children need to read both at their reading level and their intellectual level. Yes, have books at their reading level for them to practice reading to you. That's important. It really helps them to reinforce their learning. And they like to read sometimes books over and over and over again. That's terrific because not only is it reinforcing, it's also helping them with comprehension and vocabulary. However, simultaneously, if your child cannot read at grade level or their intellectual level, it is very important that you use assistive technology such as audiobooks, text-to-speech tools, and the like to maintain grade-level knowledge and vocabulary. It also allows them to practice independence and gaining information through the print. As a child is being remediated, parents must become aware of helping their child with alternative ways of gaining information other than through the visual reading print. There are many places to obtain narrated audiobooks, which are books read aloud. They promote independence, help with a child's fluency if the student follows along in their book, and allows a student to stay caught up with the intellectual level while being remediated at a lower level. They can enjoy not only pleasure books, but can stay caught up with the textbooks, thereby keeping caught up with school. Numerous private audio companies have books read by actors. They can also use electronic text or e-text that have excellent synthetic voices. Some e-texts have visuals along with the auditory, and some even have cursors that will track the words being read. There are text-to-speech readers on the market that can read anything scanned in or brought in from the web. Plus, many operating systems have software built right into them that can read text, including the web and emails. There is no reason that any child needs to fall behind their intellectual abilities, even if they are several years behind reading abilities. I personally insist that all the students that I work with use technology tools to keep them up with their intellectual levels as I am remediating them. Tracking can be helpful by using electronics. There are many manual guides to help tracking that can be purchased with colored tinted rulers and masking guides to keep eyes moving in a straight line. But sometimes even a simple index card will work. What is wonderful, however, about assistive technology is that most of the text can be changed, such as using different fonts or different sizes. Also, one can change the spacing and color. In fact, there is a new free online text called Open Dyslexia, specifically to make reading easier for dyslexics. There is software that highlights words and sentences as they are being spoken, and the child can choose their own colors for the highlighting. There is even software that grays out all except a line at a time. Similarly, understanding can be supported electronically. Rewordify.com provides a software that can be sometimes overlaid on paragraphs and sentences on web pages that will substitute easier words for difficult words. Care has to be taken, however, since the substituted word can change the meaning, which is also sometimes a problem with students when they use a thesaurus. Most of you know, however, that there are many speaking dictionaries and thesauruses and websites that you can go to as well, and most computers have built-in dictionaries and thesauruses. So help your child make sure they understand that the substituted word is not changing the meaning. Further, fluency can be helped. Listening to narrated textbooks aloud can increase reading speed for an auditory learner as they follow along the written text, thus providing sight and sound. Another wonderful tool is the highlighting software that can be run at different speeds to help with fluency. The speed at which textbooks are read can be varied. So you can read a pleasure book at a faster speed than, say, a textbook that you need to, that's a little more dense. Critical thinking or retention can be supported electronically. For critical thinking, text can be enhanced either by hand or on the computer with highlights or adding sticky notes to the text. Plus, for retention, many of those highlighters can be extracted and saved for further studying. Where to get the alternative? Learning Ally, which is narrated by a human voice, and Bookshare, which are e-texts, are two of my personal favorites, particularly for pleasure books and textbooks. However, one has to be qualified as learning disabled. And of course, there are many audiobooks that can be purchased rather nominally for the Kindle, from audible.com, the iBooks, and they don't need to have any special qualifications. Plus, some publishers provide audiobooks for qualified students. My favorite, new favorite that I didn't even know about is that public libraries also offer audiobooks for loan, as well as ebooks and videos. And these can be ordered right from your home on an app, Overdrive Media Console. It's available for every major desktop and mobile platform, including Windows and Macs and iPads and iPhones and Androids, tablets, Kindles, Nooks, Windows, PC. I mean, it's invaluable and it's free. To help with visual distraction, there are computer apps like Self-Control and Cold Turkey for blocking surfing temptations. However, I find they are best used by students themselves who are aware that they need to not keep surfing. The downside of these two tools is that once the timer is set, it cannot be stopped until the time is up. Readability and ad block are terrific. I like them because I don't like all those ads. Are wonderful for people who get easily distracted by the visuals on the screen. It's much easier to read also. Also, it's important to dedicate a workspace that is clutter-free. A hard thing sometimes to do for students, but I don't think students should be studying in their bedrooms anyway, so if you have a place in the house that they can, or even in their bedroom, set up something that's just totally devoted to reading or their schoolwork. To help with auditory, they can use anything that will cancel noise, from earplugs to noise-canceling headphones to white noise. And for sure, turn off all phones, especially cell phones. Poor readers are not exposed to challenging language, so it is important to get it in other ways. Don't depend on the school teaching vocabulary. Learning vocabulary from content is not always effective for our poor readers. Multiple research studies have all come to the general conclusion that vocabulary instruction has a very strong effect, and programs which combine direct explanation of words with reading are the most effective. A high correlation has been established by multiple studies between vocabulary and comprehension. Keith Stanovic, a renowned psychologist, says early success in acquiring reading usually leads to later success. Much of the failure is thought to be due to poor vocabulary, which discourages reading and learning in general, for that matter. So I think it's important to directly teach the vocabulary, even at home, if the vocabulary is introduced in a fun way and not made overwhelming. My experience is that students love learning new words. Making computer lists with definitions or binder of new words can help students with their studies. I often have students collect vocabulary words in the back of their book. They write right in the book that they are currently reading with the page number and definition. Making vocabulary flashcards with words on the front and definitions on the back, along with sentences and pictures, often means a student doesn't have to study the words much, since they have already thought about them so deeply in producing their sentences and pictures. It is helpful if you know the words, so you can reinforce that learning by using them in conversation with your child. Both my sons have dyslexia, and I know that it really helped them. Shelley Haven of TechPotential.net has a list of various applications online in her toolbox. In the Bay Area, Shelley will even come to your home to evaluate what might be best for your child. Or if you live too far, she can do it using a face-to-face technology. Jennifer McDonald-Pellier does something very similar in the Berkeley area, and Parents Helping Parents has a collection of various tools you can even try out in their iTech Center. In fact, they've got some you can borrow. Plus, most companies have free demos. If you don't live in the Bay Area, you can call the Learning Disability Association or the International Dyslexia Association. Mel Levine in The Myth of Laziness states that kids with reading difficulties are the innocent victims of their own wiring. They learn differently, but they have many gifts. Children who have difficulty with the written word are not broken. They learn differently.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Lynn. That was fantastic. There is so much for parents to know and watch out for. If people have questions, feel free to send them via Twitter at hashtag LdEduTalk. And if you're watching this live, we'll try to answer those live, but otherwise we will continue to answer those questions after the broadcast. So feel free to continue via Twitter to put those in there. All right, and I guess I'll start off with the first question. I'd love to hear, Lynn, sort of what your one wish for reading instruction would be for reading interventions.
Well, I think I have two wishes, I'm sorry.
You're loud.
For school, it would be that the resource teachers have more in-depth training in research-based multisensory teaching. As were for parents, it would be that they assist their child with extra assistive technology. I know some parents are a little uncomfortable using assistive technology, but I think for their children that's becoming a very important part of children's life, and you want them to use it for other than just playing games on it. You want them to realize that these are wonderful tools for them to learn from, especially with reading.
And for parents who are concerned about assistive technology becoming more of a crutch, what do you have to say to them?
I didn't get that whole thing.
Oh, sorry. If parents are worried about using assistive technology because they're afraid their kids won't learn how to read, they'll just use it as a crutch.
Wow. I actually find it quite the opposite. I find that if children have assistive technology when they are learning to read, that it actually they're dying to read, be able to read it themselves. And so I find that simultaneously doing both remediation and assistive technology actually encourages children. My experience is that once the child's really caught up through remediation, that they can meet their challenges right at their own level, and it's lovely.
So, kind of a follow-on to that, Lynn, because there's so much of what you've emphasized is assistive technology, as a great set of tools to use. I often hear from parents, yeah, well, we tried that, but it was hard to learn, or my child gave up on it. So how do you confront these problems of sort of not giving it enough time to sort of gel with regard to use of assistive technology resources?
I think if a parent understands it themselves, which is probably really key, or they have somebody who understands it, sits with them until the child really feels comfortable. Many children, for instance, when I'm using Learning Ally, and they're listening and trying to follow in their book, if they're not used to it, they don't like it right away. The same with, there's many tools out there that the kids don't like it because it's different. So I think you just have to really encourage that by enjoying it yourself, being persistent with it, and not hammering them over the head, but having it be a fun experience. So maybe you'd have to listen to audiobooks as a family and do that for a couple books before the child. You'll find, my experience is that if they do it as a family or with a parent, that eventually the child will say, I can do it myself, I don't want all that help. But yeah, don't give up right away.
That's great. And then one of the other things I wanted to really sort of tease out is this idea of the parents supporting the kids, but then also this remediation piece. We're all very familiar with the term remediation, but I just wanted to make sure parents understand what that is, because it's such a critical part in the learning how to read versus how to support your child while they're learning how to read. So could you explain a little bit more about what you mean by remediation?
Yes, I think it's really important to have both. Remediation is usually done by someone who's had a lot of training in multisensory, research-based methods for teaching it, and or even in their school, they have various reading programs. So that's equally as important as doing it at home. I find unless a parent has really had a fair amount of training, that it's hard for them and they get frustrated easily. So I think it has to happen simultaneously, and unless the parent is well trained, it happens together. So you're doing assistive technology or whatever method you're going to use to help them read at their intellectual level, while usually someone else is helping at their remediation level. Although some parents can. I did not do my own children. I found being a mother was good being a mother, and having somebody else, I mean, they actually, one of them actually went to Lindenwood Bell. I can't think what the other one did, but so I find it that you've got to be doing both.
So maybe I'll go in a little different direction here. As parents are trying to encourage their children who are either struggling to read or just encouraging them to read in general, are there counterproductive methods that parents should avoid that could actually turn the kids off or demotivate them that they should be aware of?
Well, the ones, it's funny, the ones that I am familiar with is making a child read something that they're not ready to read, making them slosh through print they just don't know and correcting every third word for them. I don't find that helps. Probably my biggest thing, and I do see it quite often, is children as parents being angry because over academic issues. You know, you got to get your homework done. You've got to read that right now. It has to be done. Let's get up at 5 because it's 11 o'clock now and you should be in bed. And that whole thing is just really counterproductive. And treating homework like it's a drudgery makes it really hard for the children to enjoy what they're learning. So I think it has to be, one of my favorite quotes is from Thomas West in The Mind's Eye. The attitude of those around the dyslexic are critical. It is not a major problem if it is not seen as a major problem. It makes big difference if they are able to focus on their strengths and patiently wait for their full expression. Even remediation is probably best done when it's done with a light touch.
I love that. That's great. And so to follow up on that, so for the parents who are having the issues around homework, what should they do in terms of kind of communicating to the school that there's an issue with the homework? Or should they, I guess, should they cut homework off at a certain point because the idea of kids staying up till 11 o'clock doing homework, you know, that type of thing? How should they interact essentially with the school and the need for this homework to get done?
Well, I think it's really important that children not learn to hate school because it's such a wonderful experience for those that are doing well. But struggling children, I think talking with the school, making sure that whoever is, if somebody's working with your child privately, being sure that they're comfortable talking to the teachers, and reduced loads are okay as long as they do not take away from, make it modified. If you modify it, what you'll do is you're kind of dumbing down the information. But you don't want to do that. You want to reduce, if you have 3 paragraphs instead of 5 paragraphs if they are having trouble, or even 1 paragraph. You want them to feel like they've really accomplished something, not like, oh my God, I hate writing, or I hate reading. So if they read slower, let them read the books, audio books that they have to keep up with, even if they're in high school, college for that matter, if the reading's really difficult. Because I think the key thing is that children learn to love school, and it's pretty hard to if you have to do things that are so far above your ability.
Let me, it's sort of tying in to working with the school and at home, as the school and the parents try to encourage kids to learn to read, do you see any differences in terms of getting kids to read more nonfiction as opposed to fiction, which has that natural storyline built in?
I think children, we live in a story culture, and I think probably for most people, children are read to from, probably the first 7 years at least. That's all they're read to is stories. And so all of a sudden you hit them with a non-story thing, they are uncomfortable with it. So I find encouraging children with books like, even magazines like Ranger Rick or Highlight or what are some of the other, Time Magazine, I don't know if they still do it, but when my children were young, they had a little section that was readable at their level. You want to get them enthusiastic about nonfiction things so that they don't suddenly hit it at, when they get to school. So if it means they have to watch it on TV, find programs that are appropriate. There are nature programs and science programs that I think kids would just love. They don't always have to watch Barney and whatever, but make it a family affair. Yeah.
Good point. Thank you.
And kind of on a slightly different note, so you talked about some of the early warning signs that come really early, around 2.5 years old, 3 years old. For parents who are concerned, and preschool's not even on the radar yet, and kindergarten's nowhere near, what should those the really early kind of signs? What should those parents be doing?
Well, I think as soon as you realize that your child's struggling, I wouldn't wait till they hate school. I think that parents need to have their child, being tested is not a horrible thing. Most children don't seem to mind. Parents worry a lot about labels. They don't have to be negative. It can be, well, this is just the way you are. Here's your strengths, here's your weaknesses, and let's use your strengths to help with your weaknesses. We've all got them. I've got them. Your dad's got them, or that kind of thing. I think it's important that they know that that's the way of life, rather than there's something special about having a learning disability.
And who do you go to get an assessment at that early age? I actually don't know that answer. I have no idea.
There are quite a few people out. Certainly at the very early age, if the school seems to say your child's having trouble, then you ask to have the school test them.
Oh, and sorry, I'm going to interrupt. I mean for the 2.5, before you're even in
2.5. Well, there are specialists that do that. There are a lot of specialists. Most doctors know. I keep a list of specialists that will test the really young children. There aren't a lot of them, really, that test the really young children, but early child development specialists will test young children, and some clinics do. I know there's clinics at Stanford and at Oakland Children's Hospital, and there's quite a few that are out there, and a handful or so of, at least in the Bay Area, of people that will test your child at 2.5 years old.
Yeah, I'm going to just hop on that. I'm aware, and certainly in school districts like Cupertino, they have what's called an early intervention or assessment program, and I believe that starts with 3-year-olds, and parents can ask, or preschool teachers will ask.
All schools.
Yeah, and then there's even psychologists who specialize in children under the age of 5. You have to look for them, but they're there.
Yeah, there's no reason if you're suspecting by 3. In fact, many of the public schools actually have programs for children 3 years old and up who are struggling with language or whatever. So take advantage of them.
Right.
Yeah, just want to highlight so people don't think we're totally paranoid. Part of the reason for that is that early intervention is so key, especially for reading. That the earlier you can work with kids, the better off. Not just because of the kind of social implications of having difficulty with reading, but because the remediation is just so much more effective the younger we can catch them. And I always like to say early intervention is great, but it's never too late. So.
That's true. It's never too late.
Yeah.
And I work primarily with the older kids.
And I'm going to hop on that and ask. So going to the older kids, a lot of times you're going to get them. They're pretty burnt out and demotivated. And I guess I was wondering if you could share an anecdote, Lynn, of taking around a sort of disinterested or resistant kid and turning that kid around as far as liking to read and learning to read.
An anecdote of that. Well, I guess one of my favorite is a young gal who came in, and she must have been early junior high, and she just didn't like to read at all. And so I put her on audiobooks, and she thought that was kind of fun, and we listened to audiobooks about almost half the time sometimes until she felt comfortable with it. And then I made sure she got an audio reader. And so then she learned to really like reading. And by the time we were finished with remediation, she couldn't stop putting books down. And I got a call from her mother who said, how are we going to stop her from always reading? She doesn't even want to come to dinner half the time. And it's disrupting our family. And so I kind of chuckled because I know the girl really well and how much she didn't like reading. So I was going, well, you should make it up for time. But, it's fun. I mean, I think if you can teach them in a fun way, usually reading becomes fun no matter what.
And to kind of, I'd love to hear if you don't mind sharing some stories about, since you mentioned your sons are dyslexic, and kind of how you handled that at home.
Oh yeah, I think I told you before this that they were studying volcanoes at school, and he was reading, and some of those geological studies, they're pretty dense and have to memorize. So we made chocolate volcano. And we finally made a big cake, and it spat out the top, and he took it to school, and the kids all had it, and it was, really fun. We did a lot of that sort of thing. I think if parents will, whatever the child's studying in science or reading or whatever, is to accompany that with their field trips on the weekend. I mean, you're going to do something fun on the weekend anyway with your child. So if they're studying oceanography, go over to the Marine Land, or go to, I think, the Rosicrucian. Is it Rosicrucian?
Yeah, down in San Jose.
I think so, and down in San Jose, because they study a period of Egyptian and they have wonderful artifacts. Going to the missions, even though they've gone to the missions with their class, maybe going with your family is quite a bit different. You're not being herded around and with a large group of kids and fooling around with your friends. You really are kind of getting that this is fun to be there. Oh, the Exploratorium is one of my favorite places to take kids, so that learning and reading is really fun.
And for people who maybe are more remote and don't have access to things, one of the ideas I really like is just going to the library and yanking out books and just looking at pictures. And we've got the internet now; you can totally explore around on there as well. But yeah, that experiential learning, I think that physical experience of things is really important. So
yeah.
So I think we had an offline conversation about this, Lynn, and that's, in the early grades, and kids are always looking at books with pictures, particularly storybooks, and then sort of you move on to books that don't. And I think in some cases kids think it's like, well, if I'm reading a book with pictures, it's kind of like beneath me or whatever. So what's your kind of opinion about reading books that have pictures versus not?
I don't know about you, I love books with pictures. In fact, I've noticed, even in high school, not so much well, even in college, an awful lot of the textbooks have pictures now. I think they're trying to get children to experience a little bit since it doesn't always have a storyline. In fact, most of the textbooks now in high school have stories, and interesting enough, the teacher skips over that story. I never know why. They assign certain pages, but they skip the story. Don't worry about the story. Well, the story is the thing that's going to catch them. So I say, okay, I'll read the story to you. Don't worry about it, But I think picture books are wonderful if you can get them. And many, like autobiographies and things like that, right in the middle of the book, they'll have pictures of that person and what they do. So I particularly like pictures for nonfiction, but even a lot of fiction books have pictures these days. And of course the cover is, most children say, I don't want to read that, strictly on the cover. So pictures are worth 1,000 words, I think.
And then actually, just kind of a follow-up, I'm curious what you think about, since there's so many movies that go along with books these days, how you think that kind of used to help support a child?
It depends upon the child whether to look at the movie first or second. But I noticed that SparkNotes now has little cartoons that they can go see the whole story. I watched it with someone the other day, Romeo and Juliet. I also watched the Macbeth one. And they have the entire story in cartoon form. Is that bad? No, it's not. It gives them a picture of what they can expect. The biggest problem with movies in general, however, is that producers like to do fancy up the plot, and so it doesn't always follow. So they do want to read the book too. But I think it's great, and it does make it easier for the children. So I encourage movies and going online.
Let me ask you this. Let's say we're coming around, we're getting a kid to read a little bit more, but to what degree should a parent be trying to track and make sure they're getting working at their intellectual level and their reading level? And related to that, do you believe in rewarding kids to try to encourage them?
Yes, I believe in rewarding kids. I mean, we get paid for what we do. That said, I think it is important for parents to know, and you don't want to be heavy-handed, but like whatever they're studying in history or whatever they're studying in English, is to find things in their daily life that will help them. Discuss it at the dinner table or whenever you discuss things. I think it's really important to read along with the kids, not necessarily simultaneously, but to be sure you've read the books they read, so you can say, oh, what did you think of so-and-so's character? And I know I just finished reading, what was it? Cyrano de Bergerac, and my student got a lot of the characters mixed up. In fact, Macbeth, it's real easy to mix up the characters. And so the kids learn to not like the books when they can't figure the whole thing out. So if a parent's reading it simultaneously or listening to it, audiobooks, because lots of parents also have learning problems, or parents don't speak English. I have a parent now who doesn't speak English. And so I make sure that she has other ways of being able to help her child, either watching a movie with her about that topic, especially with English. And her child was 4 grade levels behind.
Oh.
And the school thought it was English as a second language, and it wasn't. She was dyslexic in both languages. And so I wanted to be sure that Mom got enthusiastic about what was being, and she was learning English pretty well. And so I think it's just to parents need to be engaged in what their children are doing in a real positive way, other than just making them do homework.
And what's the way you can kind of type projects in? So for kids that are struggling with learning, a lot of times the projects are almost easier in a way. And so giving ideas around that.
And projects are great.
And could you just talk about, for parents who maybe aren't familiar with designing a project around a classroom or around homework, kind of figuring out an alternative to homework or a supplement?
Well, I think, again, if a parent, there are lots of little books out there. One of my favorite ways for kids to find, parents to find projects is to put the project online and see what other people are doing. You just type in the kid's project, and you'll be amazed the number of things that come up. And most people in the Bay Area do have access to a computer. If they don't, they can go to the library. They're wonderful about letting people use the computers there. So I think helping your child with a project, or even getting a friend to help your child with a project, if that's uncomfortable for a parent. But I think being engaged in some way with the project is, or getting someone else to be engaged, because children can get really lost if they don't know where they're going with the project. Some kids, they know right off the bat, and they see other kids' projects and they can take off. But if a child's not taking off, it's always okay to get help if you can't figure out what to do yourself.
Let me ask you this. Never mind projects. A lot of projects, or a lot of the toughest type of project that a child is asked to do at school is writing. Do you find that when the reading comes along, that it's easier to address writing? In other words, is reading sort of a prerequisite, getting better at reading, to getting better when you're struggling with writing as well?
I think they should be done simultaneously. A lot of remediation programs include a writing aspect to them. That said, I think it's really, really hard to write if you can't read, because if you haven't read enough, you don't have a broad enough well, or whatever, a deep enough well to draw from. And so I think it's really important that they do learn to read, or they do get assistive technology in reading, because it's really hard to do. By the time they get to high school, they are expected to analyze what they've read. Yeah. And if they haven't been able to write all along, it's really uncomfortable. That's when I often see the kids, is when they hit late junior high or early high school. And the reason they come to me is because they can't write, when in fact a large part of it is they haven't read enough and they really can't read at that grade level. And so I often read with them as well as write with them with their projects, because reading is key for the writing.
All right, well, thank you so much. We're actually at time. We really appreciate this. This is so much great information for parents, and I hope they can all find it helpful. And especially the assistive technology piece is such a major current thing that I think, because we didn't grow up with it, it's really hard to kind of integrate it. But I really loved how much information you brought on that. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I really enjoyed working with you, and I will see you later.
All right, thanks.
So long, everyone.
Okay, bye-bye.